There are bad days, and then there are pulling up to your property and finding a giant electric vehicle charging station planted right in the middle of it kind of days. This was the latter. I had barely slowed my truck to a stop when I saw it. Gleaming metal, obnoxiously bright signage, and a small gathering of HOA staff standing around like they had just unveiled the neighborhood's newest attraction, a charging station, on my land. I stepped out of my truck, slowly, taking in the scene. The sign was the first thing I noticed, big, bold letters that read, HOA charging station, residents only. The second thing I noticed, Karen. Clipboard in hand, barking orders at two guys in HOA-branded polo shirts, gesturing grandly like she had just cut the ribbon at a grand opening. She hadn't seen me yet. I glanced at the charging station, then back at Karen, then at the giant metal pillar they had somehow managed to install without me noticing. I exhaled, rubbing my temple. Oh, I muttered under my breath, a slow grin forming. This is going to be fun. If there's one thing Karen loves more than her clipboard, it's control. For years, she had been running the Willow Creek HOA like her own personal kingdom, issuing fines for unauthorized lawn furniture, banning unsightly front door colors, and holding surprise inspections like a one-woman Gestapo. And yet, despite all her power, there was one thing she couldn't control: my land. See, I own a nice little property right next to the HOA's jurisdiction, a stretch of land that Karen has spent years pretending she owns. She's tried everything to get me to fall in line. HOA newsletters mysteriously appearing in my mailbox? Check. Passive-aggressive letters about adhering to community standards? Check. One extremely bold attempt to get me to voluntarily join the HOA, which I laughed at and threw in the trash? Check. The problem is, Karen doesn't understand the word no. And that's why we're standing here today, because she finally took things too far. Now here's where things get really funny. I'm not just some random guy with land. I'm the state's environmental manager. I deal with land use regulations, environmental compliance, and most importantly, permits. I know every single law about where you can and can't build, what paperwork you need, and what happens when you fail to get proper authorization. But here's the thing, I never flaunt it. I don't wear my badge around town. I don't throw my title in people's faces. Which means Karen, she has no idea. She thinks she's dealing with just another non-compliant neighbor, someone she can steamroll with HOA nonsense and empty threats. But today she's about to find out exactly how big of a mistake she just made. The sheer audacity of it all was almost impressive. Karen didn't just overstep, she took a flying leap over the line, built a charging station on my land, and then had the nerve to act like she had done me a favor. No phone call, no letter, no warning. Just one giant metal monument to HOA entitlement, standing proudly on my property like it belonged there. I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as I approached the small cluster of HOA minions standing near the station. A younger guy, probably mid-30s, HOA polo tucked into his khakis, smiled politely as I walked up. "Morning," he greeted, completely unaware that I was 2 seconds away from dismantling his entire day. I gestured toward the charging station. So, who approved this?" The guy blinked. "Oh, the HOA did. I let the silence stretch." I stared at him. He stared back. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Right. And did anyone bother to check who owns this land?" His smile faltered just a little. "Well, no one really uses it, so Karen figured we could take advantage of it." I actually laughed. "Oh, she did she?" That's when I heard it. The heel clicks. The distinct rhythmic tap, tap, tap of HOA authority on a mission. Karen had arrived. She swept into the conversation like a CEO walking into a boardroom, clipboard clutched in one hand, the other gesturing grandly toward the abomination she had built. "It serves the community?" she said smoothly. Cold, condescending, confident. She turned to me, arms crossed, eyes narrowing. "You should be proud to contribute to the environment." Oh, this was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I tilted my head, pretending to consider her words. Then, ever so casually, I smiled. "Oh, actually," I said, reaching into my jacket, "I am proud." I pulled out my state-issued ID and flipped it open. Karen's eyes locked onto the words, State Environmental Management Director. Her entire face drained of color. There it was, that glorious moment when she realized she had just royally screwed herself. I gave her a slow, satisfied nod. "Because you see, Karen," I said, enjoying every syllable, this is illegal." Karen stood there, frozen, Clipboard clutched tightly in her hands like it could somehow save her. I let the silence stretch. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I pulled out my phone and opened the State Land Records database. "Let's see something real quick," I muttered, scrolling through the documents. "Since you're so confident this charging station is legal, Karen, let's check the paperwork, shall we?" Her smug mask cracked just a little. I held up a finger. "Shh! Give me a second." She shut her mouth. The HOA minions around us were dead silent. I tapped through the state's online building permit system, quickly filtering by property owner and recent construction projects. No results. I tried zoning approvals. Nothing. I checked environmental impact assessments since any major land modification, even something green like an EV station, required one under state law. And again, absolutely nothing. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head as I looked up at Karen. Well, I mused, grinning. She swallowed. It must be in processing. I laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, Karen," I said, "you didn't even apply for a permit." Her eyes darted toward the charging station, as if staring at it long enough would somehow make the paperwork materialize out of thin air. "You built this on private land, without permission, with no permits, no approvals, and no environmental assessment." I crossed my arms, watching her sweat. "You realize that's a pretty serious violation, right? Time to call in backup." Karen was still fumbling for an excuse when I pulled out my phone again. What are you doing?" she asked, voice tight. "Oh, just calling a few colleagues," I said casually. Her expression darkened. You don't have to do that." I held up a finger again. Shh. Then, into the phone. "Hey, Mike? Yeah, it's me. Listen, quick question. What's the fine for constructing an unpermitted commercial charging station on private land without an environmental impact study?" Karen visibly flinched. Mike, an old friend from the state compliance division, whistled through the speaker. "Oof. That's bad." "I know, right?" I said, smirking at Karen. Mike continued, unaware of the beautiful chaos he was fueling. "Fines vary, but for something like that, easily 6 figures." I grinned wider. "Like hundreds of thousands." "Yep, plus mandatory removal. Might even trigger an investigation into the HOA's other projects." Karen's breathing quickened. I ended the call and slid my phone back into my pocket. Then I looked at Karen, letting the weight of what she'd just heard sink in. "So," I said, "you were saying?" Karen was backed into a corner, and, like any cornered animal, she did what she did best, tried to bluff her way out. I walked up to her, folder in hand, filled with every violation, fine, and legal infraction she had committed. She stood stiffly, arms crossed, trying to maintain the last shreds of her authority as if her sheer willpower could make this all disappear. I held up the folder and smiled. "So," I said, flipping open to the first page, "tell me, Karen, exactly which permit did you file for this project?" She exhaled sharply. "I already told you the paperwork is in processing." I clicked my tongue. That's interesting because I checked. There is no paperwork, not a single permit, not even a request." Karen's lips thinned. "That's a mistake." "Oh, absolutely," I agreed, nodding. "A 6-figure mistake." Her smug expression faltered just slightly. I let that sink in for a second, then took a step forward. "You built this station illegally, on my land, and now you're looking at a major fine, a forced removal, and possibly an investigation into the HOA's finances." I smiled wider. "What's the HOA's emergency fund looking like these days?" That one hit. Hard. Karen's eyebrows twitched, her fingers tightening around her clipboard. "That's right. I knew. HOAs love their emergency funds. A little pool of money collected from homeowners, supposedly for community improvements. If that got drained to pay for Karen's screw-up, I could already hear the pitchforks being sharpened. But then, just as I thought she was about to crack, she sneered. Karen's last attempt at control. "You think you're so smart," she said, voice suddenly smooth again. She squared her shoulders, tilting her head in mock sympathy. "You can sue," she said, shrugging dramatically. "But let me remind you, the HOA has its own legal team." She gestured vaguely toward the neighborhood. "We'll drag this out for years. Legal fees alone will be a nightmare. Are you really prepared for that?" Oh, this was adorable. She still thought she was in control. She thought I'd get scared, back off, accept my fate like every other poor soul she had bullied into submission. I let a long pause stretch between us. Then, ever so slowly, I smiled. "Oh, Karen," I said, closing the folder, "I don't need to sue. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough for only her to hear. I have a faster way. And just like that, her confidence cracked. Karen thought she could scare me with legal threats. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't interested in playing her game. Lawsuits? Expensive lawyers? Dragging this out for years? No thanks. I had a much faster solution. Filing the report. That evening, I sat down with a cup of coffee, my laptop, and a mission. I drafted 2 official reports, one to the Department of Natural Resources and another to the Department of Buildings. Each one was detailed, airtight, and packed with every violation Karen had committed. Illegal construction on private property, no environmental impact assessment, no fire safety approvals, and my personal favorite, no permit whatsoever. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. Now, all I had to 48 hours later, Karen had no idea what was coming. She was probably still feeling smug, thinking she had bullied me into submission. But then, just before noon on a bright and beautiful Wednesday, 3 official government vehicles pulled into the neighborhood, and the real fun began. The inspectors arrive. A team of state inspectors stepped out, clipboards in hand, high-visibility vests on, radiating pure authority. One of them, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, adjusted her sunglasses and glanced at the towering EV station. "Wow," she muttered. "That's definitely illegal." I grinned. Karen, however, Karen was in full panic mode. She stormed out of her house, clipboard clutched like a lifeline, already mid-rant. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice an octave higher than usual. The lead inspector barely glanced at her. "State building inspection," she said. "We received a report about an unauthorized structure." Karen visibly paled. I assure you, this is perfectly legal," she stammered. "The HOA." The inspector held up a hand. "Let's see your permit." Karen froze. The silence was delicious. A long list of violations. For the next hour, the inspectors went over the charging station with a fine-tooth comb. And let me tell you, they were not impressed. Every 5 minutes, another violation popped up. No building permit, no electrical leakage treatment system, failure to meet fire safety standards. At one point, an inspector even pulled out a tape measure and muttered, "Jesus, this thing isn't even level." By the time they were done, Karen wasn't just sweating, she looked like she was about to pass out. The lead inspector shook her head, scribbling one final note on her clipboard. "This is a disaster," she said. "We're shutting it down immediately." Karen made a strangled noise. You can't do that," she cried. The inspector raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I absolutely can." She turned to one of her colleagues. "Seal it." A bright orange sticker was slapped onto the charging station. Official notice, closed by state order. Karen let out a horrified gasp, and me? I just stood there, arms crossed, enjoying every second of it. Karen wasn't just in trouble, she was in disaster mode, because less than 24 hours after the inspectors sealed off the charging station, the official fine notice arrived, and let me tell you, it was a thing of beauty. The $400,000 bombshell. The fine was big, bigger than even I had anticipated. $50,000 for illegal construction, $75,000 for multiple safety violations, another $270,000 for failing to meet state environmental regulations. Grand total, $400,000, and that's not even counting the mandatory removal costs. The neighborhood erupts. Word spread fast. By the next morning, the entire HOA was in full-blown panic mode. Residents gathered in the streets, whispering, shouting, waving HOA notices in the air. "My fees are already too damn high," one man shouted. "I never even wanted this stupid station," a woman fumed. "Wait, Karen never told us about any of this?" someone else asked, eyes widening. Oh, that was the best part. Because up until this moment, most of the residents had no idea this project even existed. Karen had pushed it through without an official vote, banking on the fact that no one would notice until it was too late. Well, now they noticed, and they were furious. Emergency meeting. Karen tries to control the chaos. By that evening, the HOA had called for an emergency meeting. The clubhouse was packed, residents practically vibrating with anger. Karen stood at the front, visibly sweating, trying to maintain control. "Everyone, please, let's remain calm," she shouted over the noise. Spoiler alert, no one remained calm. Chash, the turning point. A resident stood up, a retired veteran named Ed, who had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. He crossed his arms. "Karen," he said, voice steady, Did we vote on this? Karen hesitated, a beat too long, and in that pause the room erupted. You spent our money without telling us? You expect us to pay for this? This is fraud! Karen raised her hands, voice shrill. Now let's not be dramatic. The room erupted again. Oh, Karen, you're losing control, and you have no idea how much worse it's about to get. By the next morning, Karen had officially entered EA'd survival mode. The HOA was in shambles, the residents were furious, and the $400,000 fine was hanging over her head like a guillotine. She had spent years running this neighborhood like a dictatorship, and now the people were ready to revolt. Which is probably why at exactly 9:17 a.m., I got a phone call. Karen's last-ditch effort, I picked up, already knowing exactly who it was. Karen's voice came through the line, but it was different. Gone was the smug condescension, the faux authority. This time, she sounded desperate. Listen, she started, trying to keep her voice even. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I nearly laughed. The wrong foot? I repeated. Karen, you built an entire charging station on my land without permission. A long pause. Then her tone softened even further. Can we resolve this peacefully? Oh, this was delicious. Karen, the queen of the HOA, the woman who had spent years issuing fines, making lives miserable, and ruling with an iron clipboard, was now begging me for mercy. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to think about it. Then I smiled. The simple solution. Sure, I said. I have a solution. Karen perked up immediately. Oh, yes, of course. What is it? I let the silence stretch, just long enough for her to sweat. Then I listed out my terms. Remove the charging station immediately. Not in a week, not in a month, now. Publicly apologize to the residents for abusing her power. Pay me damages for the unauthorized use of my land. Karen went dead silent in a barely audible voice. How much in damages? I grinned. Let's just say enough to make you regret ever putting that thing on my property. Checkmate. Karen's breathing grew uneven. She knew she had no choice. The residents were turning against her. The city was on her back. The HOA board was in chaos. And now I was giving her the only way out. She swallowed hard. Fine, she finally whispered. I'll do it. And just like that, the reign of Queen Karen was officially over. Karen had agreed to my terms. But her problems? Far from over. Because while she might have been willing to bend to save herself, the rest of the HOA, not so forgiving. The HOA meeting, a powder keg ready to explode. By the time the emergency HOA meeting started that evening, the clubhouse was at full capacity, and the mood, tense. Homeowners packed the room, many clutching copies of the violation notice, the fine breakdown, and the absolutely infuriating realization that their beloved HOA had just cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Karen stood at the front, no clipboard, arms stiff at her sides, sweating bullets. She knew this wasn't just another meeting. This was her trial. And the jury made a revolt. The meeting had barely started when a man in the back, Ed, the retired veteran, stood up. Karen, he said, voice carrying through the room, did you or did you not approve this project without consulting anyone here? Karen's jaw tightened. Well, yes or no, he snapped. She hesitated. And in that half-second pause, the room exploded. You spent our money without a vote? You thought we wouldn't notice a $400,000 fine. This is fraud. Karen raised her hands, desperate to regain control. Everyone, please, let's remain civil. Civil? A woman shouted. You buried us in debt. Karen flinched. The board members at the table looked increasingly uncomfortable. And then the moment Karen had been dreading arrived, the final blow. I move for a vote of no confidence, one board member said, standing up. Karen's head snapped toward her. I second it, another board member said, crossing his arms. Karen went pale. All in favor of removing Karen from the HOA presidency? A sea of hands shot up. Karen's breathing became shallow. She spun to the remaining board members. Tom? Dave? She pleaded. Dave, the same man who had always backed her HOA nonsense, didn't even look at her. Sorry, Karen, he muttered. You brought this on yourself. Karen's entire body sagged. She looked around, searching for an escape. There was none. Ed leaned forward, now smirking. Time to pack it up, sweetheart. Checkmate. The fall of the Clipboard Queen. Karen stormed out of the clubhouse, shoulders stiff, face twisted in silent rage. No parting speech, no final power play, no sympathy, just a woman who had once ruled the neighborhood, now reduced to nothing. I watched her go, arms crossed, enjoying every second, and as the door slammed behind her, someone in the back started clapping. Then another, and within seconds, the entire room erupted into cheers. Karen was gone, and the HOA, broken, battered, and $400,000 poorer. The aftermath. Once Karen was out, the remaining HOA board members had no choice but to deal with the fallout. The city gave them 30 days to remove the illegal charging station, and since Karen had burned every bridge on her way down, no one was willing to fight for her. The board scrambled to cover the fines, dipping into their beloved emergency fund, the same fund Karen had used for years to enforce her ridiculous policies. And when that wasn't enough, they had to increase HOA fees. Oh, that went over beautifully. Homeowners rioted. People who once blindly followed Karen's rules were now shouting in HOA meetings demanding accountability. Lawsuits started flying, and as the dust settled, the once feared Willow Creek HOA became a cautionary tale for every HOA in the county. You overstep, you pay the price. Karen's quiet exit. Karen tried to stick around at first. She refused to believe that her reign was truly over. She tried to attend a few HOA meetings, lurking in the back like a ghost of bad decisions. But no one listened. No one feared her. And soon enough, she put her house on the market and left. No grand farewell speech, no final power play, no legacy, just a woman who once thought she was untouchable. Now, she was just another name on a for sale sign. A small celebration. A few weeks later, after everything had settled, I decided it was time to celebrate. With some of the money I received in damages from the HOA, I threw a backyard coup for my mother and a few neighbors. We grilled steaks, we drank beer, we laughed about the downfall of the Clipboard Queen, and honestly, it was one of the best meals I'd ever had. A simple answer. Later that evening, as I was packing up, a kid from the neighborhood rode up on his bike. He skidded to a stop, staring up at me with wide eyes full of curiosity. "Hey," he said, "are you the guy who brought down the HOA?" I stared at him for a second, then grinned. I crouched down, lowering my voice like I was about to share a secret. "No, kid," I said. "I'm just an environmentalist," he laughed. "Cool." Then he pedaled off, disappearing down the same street Karen once ruled. I stood there for a moment, watching the peaceful neighborhood she had tried so hard to control, and for the first time in a long time, it actually felt like home.